that dealt with the society, with their societal problems, were supposed to be handled at the lowest rung on the ladder, if you will. And it's still supposed to be this way. In fact, the Anglo-Saxons and ancient Israel, it was amazing how much they are alike, the way they break up their government. And in fact, Thomas Jefferson, this is out of actually the notes of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson wanted the Great Seal of America to be the children of Israel in the wilderness, led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And on the other side, it should have Hengist and Horsa, the Saxon chiefs from whom we claim the honor of being descended and whose political principles and form of government we have assumed. This was what he said he wanted the Great Seal to look like. Very interesting, actually. I was actually, this probably, and I thought, now why would this be so important to us as a Tea Party? Because I think if we want to look back, and I mean, I think most of us want the restoration. I heard it many times, the restoration of America. But what does that look like in the 21st century? Archaic. It looks archaic. It does. But it also, because we have seen the encroachment of federal government into every aspect of our life. Every single aspect. I can't think of one place where the federal government does not have its hands. Can you? What it was like. I know. Now, why did I bring all of this up today? Because I am very concerned, I have been very concerned for a long time as a member of the Tea Party that our sights are too short. That what we're teaching our children about our past is not far enough back for them to really understand. And what we're trying to do in the future isn't a far enough reach. Do we have to do it incrementally? Yes. But it's not just about lowering taxes or ridding ourselves of Obamacare or nullifying unconstitutional federal law. It's about changing the heart of America. And it's tough because so many people rely on the federal government. How are we going to change the heart of America? I mean, we have to reteach a generation of people what it means to be self-sufficient in some respects. What good and evil really look like. That how being a burden on society doesn't help you. How those who have who have more should help those closest to them, rather than expect government to do it. Because the restoration we're looking for is not just in the houses of Congress. It's going to be in our houses. In our houses, yes.
I understand your point regarding perhaps a lack of understanding of history and how important it is to know where we come from. But isn't it very important, though, even more important in that we consider the fact that we have to rebuild the values that these people have? Mm-hmm. You know, the integrity,
yep.
all those values. So without that, history really wouldn't mean anything because
that's right.
It would be ignored.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. What we really need is a change. That's what I mean by a change of heart. A change of values.
All right.
A change of values. Yes?
I think Leigh Ann, you made a beautiful point about the fact that oftentimes we confuse freedom with license.
That's right.
You know, for example, I'll give you a small example, and this is something as an activist, you know, I speak to young people about all the time. You know, I have the right to sit here in this room and eat these jelly beans. What I don't have the right to do is eat the jelly beans and then take the empty wrapper and throw it on the ground. Mm-hmm. You know, I have the right to listen to my favorite type of music and in turn keep it at a reasonable volume where I can hear it. But unless we're having a block party, what I don't have the right to do is take the speakers and put them outside the window, you know, when people are trying to sleep and blast it as loud as I can.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so, well, and I think one of the biggest problems, as a civil rights activist, we have lost, we've gotten away from the principles that Dr. King taught. Yes, he was about civil rights and equality and justice and for the right, of minorities to have their equal place in America. But along with civil rights comes civil responsibility.
That's right. Civil responsibility.
Every time a police officer, apprehends a criminal for a crime, and then that criminal happens to be black, we can't just stand up and yell racism. We have to dig down deep and understand, what did this criminal do? What did this guy do in order to be, unfortunately shot sometimes or treated in a rough way? Is it because the officer is white and the suspect is black? Or is it because the suspect, did things that, he ought not be doing?
That's true. Yes. Go ahead.
How would you distinguish between Israel being a theocracy and the United States specifically not being a theocracy, but being more pluralistic religiously?
Okay, I will deal with that. Our founders actually expected religion to play a much heavier role than it does today. And in fact, at the same time that the Constitution was ratified, so was the Northwest Territory resolution. And in the same Congress, and I actually want to read this to you because I found this very interesting. The year 1787, the year the Constitution was written by the Convention and approved by Congress, that same body of Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance. It outlawed slavery, and it also enunciated the basic rights of citizens in language similar to that was later incorporated in the Bill of Rights. But in Article 3 it says religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall be encouraged. Religion, it was not, when they wrote freedom of religion, they did not want, actually states already had endorsed religions. Actually each state had it, many of the states had its own religion.
Six or
It was,
seven.
yes.
Not all of them, it's like 6 or 7.
6 or 7 had them. Not all. Yes, Maryland had an official religion. Virginia had an official religion. Massachusetts had an official.
Pennsylvania had a religious freedom.
Yes. So, but when they mentioned about freedom of religion, they didn't mean that no religion could ever be spoken. In fact, they thought it should play a very heavy role in America because they understood the values that it would bring. What they didn't want was the government to say, you must belong to this church or this denomination or this faith. Congress shall make no law. They were very specific. The federal government could not institute a religion, but there was no ever intentions that states would be forced to be religion free.
Yeah, didn't the concept of separation of church and state, wasn't that developed by our Supreme Court justice who was a Ku Klux Klaner?
Well, the actual word, the separation of church and state, the wall of separation, actually comes from our dear friend Thomas Jefferson. But the reason for it was to keep the government out of the church, not the church out of the government. It was never intended, religious freedom was never intended to keep the church, the beliefs of the church, the morals of the church out of government. It was meant to keep government out of the church. And unfortunately, this administration has decided that it will tell or request churches to preach certain sections of the Bible to encourage a civil society. Yes. Which is actually the opposite of what was supposed to happen.
I just wanted to comment that over time, every state, they disestablished their churches by the 1830s, certainly by the 1830s, but Protestantism remained extremely influential, and that was taken for granted up until pretty recently. But the framers of the Constitution, for good reason, feared a religious
That's
establishment.
right.
They had the example of the Roman Catholic and Anglican
Mhm.
churches.
Yes, they were looking, in their time period, they were looking at the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church. What they didn't want was a national church. What they did want, however, was the influence that the church gave its citizens to be part of the national discussion, the public square. At one time, Jefferson in Virginia allowed a courthouse to serve as a church for all different faiths, all different denominations. They took a turn. What was really amazing about this is that one denomination and the members of the other denomination would go 1 week, so they would mix and mingle, and that was the understanding. So when we think about the morals or the religion, it wasn't to separate it. It was to just keep government's hands out of the church. It was not to keep the church's members or their faith or their morals out of government. That's what religious freedom was supposed to be about.
Well, without disagreeing with anything you say, it's a little more complex because certain states did have established religions. In Massachusetts, it was a puritanical. In Virginia, it was the Anglican.
In church?
In Maryland, at least for a while, it was the Catholic.
Church.
And then you had Pennsylvania with religious freedom, and you were never going to get all the states, or at least 9 of them, to agree on one religion. And that's why they had to have a no establishment clause. The federal government couldn't establish a religion or prohibit the free exercise of. There's no language about separation in the First Amendment.
That's right, there's no language. That's what I was saying. The letter of separation actually comes, the words, that phrase, separation, actually comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote
Years
to the
later.
Danbury Baptist Church.
Years later.
Years later.
Many years later.
Many.
And
And it was
Thomas-
actually to keep the government, it was actually because they didn't want an official holiday. They were asking about an official holiday. He said, no, there should be a separation to keep the government out of the church.
And Jefferson was not at the Constitutional Convention.
Yeah, no, I know that.
He was in France.
Yes, I know. These notes were his from writing, actually the Virginia Constitution, the notes he took for the Virginia Constitution. When he heard about, when he knew that the Constitution, the convention was coming on, he sent the books with these notations and other books to James Madison. His personal library went to James Madison for the Constitutional Convention. I know he wasn't there, he was in France. Yes?
So what about Hugo Black and Roosevelt? Roosevelt appointed Hugo Black the Ku Klux Klansman, and he developed the concept of no religion at all in the public square. Can you comment on that?
Not really, not at this moment. What do you want to know? I mean, I know the case, but I mean, I know what he said, but what do you want to know in particularly? That a member of the Ku Klux Klan did it, that Roosevelt had some bad appointments? Of course he did. Roosevelt was trying to undermine everything the Constitution ever stood for. Everything the Constitution stood for. And in fact, when the courts were ruling against him during the New Deal, he said, you want to rule against me? That's fine. I'll just appoint more justices. Yes.
I want to say something people aren't going to like, but for years...
Can you stand up
various
so we can hear you?
For years, various Jewish groups have been trying to drive public expressions of Christianity out of the public place, like, public prayer in the schools. I don't think they got anywhere. As late as World War II, I know some private colleges, such as Harvard, had mandatory chapel attendance. Then after the war, there was the GI Bill. And that was, you might say, the foot in the door. So then, legitimately, the federal government could tell private schools, you can't mandate chapel attendance because you're receiving federal money. So that's another problem there. He who pays the piper gets to call the tune. So that's another problem.
But there are private institutions that still require chapel attendance today that get federal funds from FAFSA. Yes.
Annapolis is one.
Mhm.
Annapolis is one, and there's 3 midshipmen suing Annapolis right now to remove the requirement to say prayer for meals. The attack on religion continues.
Oh, it does. It continues, and it will continue, and it will. And do you know why?